Welcome to the Spring Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge Masterclass, lesson number 7, smoothing out your layers and adding nuances. Hey, I hope you're doing well, and it's good to see you again here and continue to work on this monochromatic portrait of a person praying at his table with a Bible and a lamp. I don't know if that's going to be the title of the painting, probably not, but that's what we're painting, and I'm so glad that you're working on this with me here. It's been amazing to see so many awesome paintings in our Facebook groups. You're doing just a great job on it, developing the value structure, showing the emotion of the person praying, getting a sense of the form and the anatomy, the shading, composition, the brushwork. You're doing a great job, and I just want to commend you on that. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to seeing your painting finished. And that's what we're here for, is to help you to paint a portrait you can be proud of. When we're doing a monochromatic painting like this, we don't have to concentrate on colors. We're just looking at that dramatic sense of light, kind of like a Caravaggio painting from the Renaissance, really getting a sense of that contrast, the chiaroscuro effect of the dramatic lights and darks. And we did that. That's what we did in our last lesson together. Now in this lesson, what we want to do is smooth out some of the brushwork. We'll build up a little bit more of the tonal value structure and get some of our darkest values a little bit darker, our midtones. But I really want to show you how to do some smoothing out. You know, if you have some rough brushwork in your painting, I have a little bit in mine. We're going to dive in deep, zoom in a little closer, show you how to resolve those areas using semi-opaque glazes, and then do a little nuance work as well. All right, so before we begin though, I do want to invite you to take the Portrait Painting Challenge. It's not too late. You can sign up at realisticacrylic.com/acrylic-portrait-painting-challenge. When you sign up, we'll send everything you need, and we'd love to have you take part in this challenge. You'll get the masterclass lessons sent to you, and of course the welcome kit with the supplies list and the reference photo so you can paint along with us. And the challenge is completely free, so why not give it a shot? We've seen so many artists that never painted a portrait before take our previous challenges, and in their very first attempt painted a beautiful portrait that they were proud of. Not a Rembrandt, but it looked like a person. It had good shading, and some of them even got commissioned portraits as a result of doing this challenge in the past. So you can do it too. All right, I'm guessing though, if you're watching this video, you probably already started. So let's dive into the process. Before I do that though, I do need to pray. I need God's help to help me to teach this lesson well, and I'm going to pray for you too. So Father, I ask a blessing on this session. Help me to be able to teach this class well. I pray a blessing over the students that are watching these videos and painting along with us here. And I pray, Lord, that you would help them to finish their paintings well. Now we have one more lesson to go. But Lord, I pray that in this lesson here, they would take the advice, the tips, and the techniques I teach them to heart, and they incorporate them into their own paintings, and it would develop them even further as artists, being able to paint monochromatic. So Lord, I just pray a blessing over this. Help me to do the shading, the brushwork well. Keep everyone in good health, keep them safe, and continue to provide for them, Lord. In Jesus' name, bless this class. Amen. All right, let's get started here. We're going to dive right in. Okay, and we have the palette here, and I'm going to put a little bit of matte medium on that palette and just get that going. And what we're going to do is we will grab I think a half-inch flat, and we'll work with that because it's just got the right amount of width that'll enable us to be able to cover everything well. And so take this half-inch flat, and we're going to take just a little bit. Well, we'll start with ivory black, as we have been. And since we're going to be adding a little bit of titanium white, I'm not going to be using ultramarine blue. So that's where things get a little interesting. You know, because we have been doing this with the glazing technique, anytime when you mix ivory black with matte medium, you're going to see that light disperse through it, and it's going to make the paint look kind of brownish as it's that translucent layer. And that's why we've been adding ultramarine blue to kind of combat and counteract that effect of the light shining through. Now, since we're adding titanium white, and that tends to cool down any color mixtures that you have, we're not going to be adding ultramarine blue, or we will in very limited areas. And it depends, you know, how opaque or translucent we get. But I am adding some titanium white, and I'm not going to use any ultramarine blue unless I need to. As I apply it, I'll get an idea and see how it looks. But for right now, we're just doing kind of a mid-tone. And so I've got my white card here, and what I'll do is I'll actually draw a little line just so that we can get an idea of the opacity. And we'll just set this right here. And then we'll apply it on top, and you can see it's got a little opacity, but the color still isn't quite right yet. We might have to add a little ultramarine blue, so I can get a sense already that it's looking a little too brownish. And I'm wanting to start out of the darkest areas on his vest, so I need to get the tonal value correct. Add a little more ivory black, and I will need a bit of ultramarine blue, but not as much. Not as much as we needed in the past. Maybe just a touch of alizarin crimson. So smaller ratio. And I'm going to just apply it here and kind of see how this looks as we apply it on the canvas. And just get a sense for the overall look here. So yeah, it's matching pretty well. It's probably a little too opaque though, so we're going to add a little bit of matte medium and just thin that out a bit. So here it is on the white card. So it's got a little bit of the titanium white in it, which will kind of smooth things down. So as we apply this over the bottom area, it's going to lighten things up a little bit. But you just want to basically match, you know, this color down here, and as it goes over some of these other areas, it should help smooth it out. Now it's good to work in sections. I'm not going to work past this table leg. I just want to basically smooth out this one section, and then I'm going to go to the next section and smooth that out. So we apply that right over the top. Again, the idea of this is just to smooth out some of the blotchiness that unfortunately does result from using the glazing technique. It's just one of the side effects of that. But it has so many other benefits that we just use it, you know, because it allows us to get that greater sense of luminosity. It allows us to be able to preserve the detail in our sketches. It also allows us to be able to create amazing blending effects. So there's many, many reasons to use the glazing technique, but one of the side effects is it does tend to show the brushwork in a blotchy way. And so it's necessary then to go over with these semi-opaque smoothing glazes and just kind of smooth things out. And so that's what we're doing here. Just going over and smoothing everything out. So you can see how that's kind of affecting the overall color. Now as I get into these lighter areas, I'm going to have to add a little more titanium white into the mix. Well, I think I actually have a lighter mix over here. Let's just see how that looks. It's not quite light enough. We'll add a little more titanium white and matte medium as well. Let's see how I'm mixing it. I'm just kind of flipping my brush over, flipping it over, and really getting it nice and smooth on there. There it is on the white card. Now we'll see what this looks like as we apply this. Yeah, it's still a little too dark. Add a little more titanium white, and as we're adding more and more titanium white, you can see I haven't added any ultramarine blue to this. It's really not necessary at this point with so much titanium white in the mix. That just kind of cools everything down. A little bit more. And just kind of fold this over, flip it over, get a little matte medium on here. Now this is more of an art than a science. All right, so it's going to take a little bit of trial and error, but the idea is to lighten up that semi-opaque glaze as it gets into the lighter areas. You're trying to basically match whatever color you're working on top of. It can be maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, but pretty much what you're trying to do is just match what you've got. Now, because it is translucent, you're going to see your glazes underneath, and it's going to blend right through. Now here we're going to go with a kind of a mid-tone. We're just going to smooth out this area right here because it's looking a little rough. Generally, to smooth it out, you want something that is a little bit lighter than what's below it. So that tends to work pretty well. All right, and this just gives the painting a little more richness and depth as we do this here. So it might take a few layers to really blend this out the way we'd like to do it, but it does give you an idea what we can do. Now we're going to continue on, and we're going to do the same thing to the curtains on this side. Well, I just need to add a tiny bit of ultramarine blue to that. Just the color looks a little warm and it doesn't quite match. So a little bit of ultramarine blue. Just work that in. Whoops. Okay, we're going to brush downward. And then I'm going to go into a little bit of a lighter part of the mix right here. Again, get some matte medium on the brush. Make it a little more translucent. This is still pretty translucent. That's why I call it semi-opaque. It's definitely not completely opaque. Now a little more titanium white and matte medium to thin that out. And a bit of ultramarine blue. All right, and that's how we really blend these things out here. Now we're going to add this over the top of this one. All right, so we're blending that. Going to the lighter part of the mix, it's got more titanium white in it. I'm brushing kind of horizontally, diagonally, because most of my brush strokes were pretty vertical. So again, this is going to help smooth things out. I've been talking about elsewhere how I've been doing some drywalling lately. I have a bathroom in my home that's been sitting for 3 years with just drywall on it, screws, hasn't been taped or mudded, and it's just time to get that done. So a little bit here, a little bit there. I've been taping and mudding, and it's kind of like painting in a way, and yet kind of not. I've had to watch YouTube videos to find the best way to do it. But what I've been finding out is that if you smooth out your strokes in drywalling, you're going over the surface and you're really getting a nice smooth finish as you're leveling the trowel or the taping knife over the top of the surface, then you don't have to do as much sanding. And likewise with this, if you did your glaze work pretty smoothly, you don't have to do as much work with the semi-opaque smoothing layers. But the nice thing is, if you do have some blotchiness, you can still smooth things out. Just like with mudding a drywall section, you can always sand it if you have some lumps. So that's kind of what we're doing here, is we're just smoothing things out. And yeah, I think this will work. Now, let's go ahead and work on his arm, where we're just going to add a glaze over the arm, and we're going to kind of smooth things out there and darken some of the tones just a little bit. So we're just going to pick something kind of in the middle here and just go over the arm. Yeah, that's going to be too opaque. It's got to be a little bit darker and a little more translucent. So this is what it is on the white card. And I'll add just a little bit of ultramarine blue to that. Again, not as much as what you would need initially with just completely translucent glazes. Okay, so this is good. This has got just enough white in it that it's smoothing things out. And I'm going to just, probably should have prepared this ahead of time, but I'm just going to put a little markered section here so that we can show you the opacity of what this looks like. This is a piece of cardstock, so this isn't going through the paper. If it was, I'd be in a little bit of trouble. I just want to show you what this looks like here with a nice black section and how opaque it actually is. So it's not very opaque. I mean, if we zoom in and you really want to see what this looks like, just show you right here what this looks like. See how that's just has a tiny, tiny bit of white in it, not much at all. So it doesn't take much titanium white in it at all to smooth things out. So that's something you really want to keep in mind here. It's just a little bit. Look at this. See how little that is? Not much at all. So your level of titanium white in there is probably going to be, just 5% or less. It's really not much at all. But it does make a difference, and it smooths things out nicely. Just having that little bit in there. Just about 5%. And I'm just estimating. I'm not giving you an exact figure, of course. So we just smooth out his arm a little bit. Then we'll want to smooth out, let's see, his face. And so let's just go over that whole thing. We're going to add a glaze right on the top. And just start smoothing that out as well. Again, the same glaze. It's got just that tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of titanium white in it, but it goes a long way, and it really helps to smooth things out. It also helps to obscure your pencil lines, because I know a lot of artists are like, I can still see the pencil lines, still see the sketch, but this will help to smooth that out and obliterate them a little bit. We can put a little bit of this glaze as well right below on the hands. Whoops. Zoom that out the other way. And put that right on his hands right here. So a little bit of that glaze right there. There it is. All right. I'm just going to continue this process. Let's do some semi-opaque work on the table. That's going to be important just to really show that. And we're going to just fill this in a few sections on the table. Add just a little bit of ultramarine blue to this. Yeah, just right here, but this actually could go a little bit lighter. And we need a little more matte medium. Again, that's a little too opaque. There it is. That's better. All right, so we bring this out from that shadow, and then we're going to go ahead and add a glaze to the top of the table. I need a little bit of ultramarine blue to it though, because I added some matte medium. And the idea of doing this is just to keep everything kind of in the same tonality, because otherwise we'll have those bluish areas and brownish areas in our monochromatic painting that don't match. And we're just trying to avoid that. Just trying to avoid that. So, okay, so it's a little bit darker right under the lamp. So I'm just going to get this darker part of the mix on my brush. And we'll go ahead and just add that in, that little bit of the darker area right under the lamp. Well, that was that was a bit too dark. Just wipe it off, no big deal, and we'll move into a lighter section. All right, let's try that again. The reason we need to have this darker area for the lamp is because the actual lamp is casting a reflection on the table, casting a slight little reflection on the table. So we need to make sure that we have that reflection exhibited there, and that's important. Okay, so this is coming along well. Now with this being done, I think we're going to go, yeah, let's just go ahead and darken that bottom section of the table. I kind of missed this area right down here. So ivory black, a little bit of ultramarine blue. I have a bit of titanium white in this already. I just want to make sure I'm darkening this, but also smoothing out a couple of areas. Let's add a little more titanium white. This can go right on the bottom part of this table, and we'll just smooth things out with that. Just smooth it out. That's good. You should still be able to see right through it though, which is good. And then let's smooth this kerosene container on the other side. Just go over that a little bit, smooth that out. So there's a lot of nuances we can add, and it's gonna take a little work getting it here little by little. Add this glaze to the inside of that butler's tray. All right, that's good. Let's add a little bit of a shadow here to this shadow being cast by his arm. I just want to smooth that out a bit, and then maybe kind of obscure this edge. Yeah, I'm just going to obscure this edge a little bit. We need a little lack of definition right here. So I'm just going to go over this and kind of lighten that up and darken the other side. So that would be this section right here. You just need to get this edge of the table a little more ambiguous and work in a little bit of a darker value as well, right under his arm, right there. That's just part of what I'm seeing taking place. And I'll just dab it a little bit with my finger. And the shape of his arm, will have to redefine that because it's gotten just a bit lost in the process, which is fine. You can definitely redefine that. All right, so now let's do some nuance work on his face. That's going to be important to do that. And we just want to make sure we've got, you know, the darkest values as dark as they should be. And since we put that semi-opaque smoothing layer, what happens sometimes is you'll tend to lose a little bit of the contrast of your darkest values because you actually lighten them up a little bit. So you have to restore them. But as you restore them, you're also going to be adding some additional visual information that wasn't there. You'll be adding more nuances that were not in the original layers that you had. So it's kind of a restoration and then kind of going further. And I think of that in spiritual life. You know, as I record this video, Pentecost Sunday is just 2 days away. And I am praying for a revival. And a revival, of course, is a returning to the way things once were, in a sense, but it's also going deeper. I want to go deeper in my walk with God. And that's what this painting really is all about. It's about a man who's going through some difficult times and he's seeking God for the answers that he doesn't have. Well, let's go ahead and just add a little bit of ivory black to this. I'm going to put my white card up here so you can see what's going on. This is what we've got. So that's a pretty dark layer. That might be a little too dark. Let's just go a little lighter, just a little bit lighter. So this is what we have here. And what we want to do is just kind of darken. Well, actually, I guess the first one was better. A little bit of ultramarine blue to the bottom. And so we have to make sure we have the tonal value correct and the actual tint of the color correct. So a little bit of ultramarine blue is still necessary at this stage to make sure that these glazes are going to match. This is a little bit more semi-opaque. See, there's a little bit of a reflected light on the bottom. So I can't just darken that beard all the way. I've got to leave some room for this reflected light down there. Well, that'll be important to do that. Just going to blend that beard up a little bit. Then we're going into this somewhat lighter glaze. Yep, somewhat lighter glaze. And that's going to kind of blend into the face. We're just going a little lighter. So you have this progression, dark, little lighter on my palette. And we just kind of work this all in that way. All right, so these glazes, again, semi-opaque. But how opaque are they? Look on the white card. This is a little more opaque. All right, when you apply it and smooth it out, you can see, though, it's still only about 5 to 10% opaque. But when you apply it over your painting, it feels totally different in some ways than the traditional glazes that you were using up to this point. So it is just kind of adding an additional richness to everything. And we're going to darken the interior of the ears a little bit. Just darken them a little bit, and there we go. So it might be a little tricky. You might have some areas that look a little bit cooler in tone and some a little warmer. And I have that in my painting too, and to some degree that's tolerable. We can work with that. We're trying to minimize it as much as we can, but remember, this painting doesn't have to be perfect. You're just going to be learning a lot of things in this, and I think you'll end up with a painting you'll be proud of, but you don't want to have expectations that are misplaced. You don't want to expect to have a Rembrandt, but definitely shoot for it. Definitely aim for it. And even the Bible says to aim for perfection, but really we don't achieve it in this life. Only Jesus did that, right? So all we want to do is just really follow in his footsteps and do our very best work. And that's when we can create something that's beautiful. Now, so I'm just kind of smoothing that whole area out, and I don't want to completely lose the detail. There's still more detail to be added, but again, it's all part of the process. Now, I'm going to get a little bit darker by his head, and I'm just going to zoom in a bit further and really show you some of the brushwork that's happening here. So we get it a little bit darker right under the nose, and I think at this point, I'm going to switch brushes, and let's see if we can go with, I'll go with this one right here. I also need to spray my palette, keep everything nice and moist. But let's go ahead and just put in a little bit of a nuance, this area below his nose. Just work in the nasolabial fold a little bit. Shape of the nostril. I need to move this white card over because I'm getting some paint on myself. I want to really work the shape of the eyes in here. Eventually we'll want to also get in some of the some of the sense of the furrowed brow, work that in. All right, so I'm just going to also darken the interior of the ears a little bit, get that ear canal in there developed. A little bit of a shadow on the bottom of the lobe. Just going to develop that a little bit. And we'll bring this glaze out a little further to the rest of the face. Right. Okay, I think that's good. And let's develop a little bit of shading along the bottom edge here of the vest and where that meets his arm, and that's going to be important. And we'll also work on the hands a little too. Obviously, that's a big part of what we're painting. So we just want to develop a little bit of the shading right along the edge of his hand. Can get a little bit darker right at this area where his thumb meets the rest of his face. And we just want to develop that, and then we blend out of it into the rest of the area. So on my palette, I'm mixing it into this lighter part of the mix from the darker part of the mix. Doing some curvilinear brush strokes to blend that up and out. And darken the thumb just a little bit. And the fingers, and we'll just suggest there's a bit of a shadow being cast from those fingers. Darken his knuckles. That's all part of the process too. And then we have this shape right here, the shadow being cast under his nose, over the finger. So develop that. And we'll add a little ivory black, a little ultramarine blue. And what we want to do is just kind of darken this area up here by his eye and get a little bit of a nice sense of contrast there. And this is a size 4 round that we're using, so it has the ability to get some pretty good precision, but I'm not going with full detail yet using, the size 1 or size 0 ot brush. I'm not doing that yet. Get a little bit of shading right by the thumb. I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to this. We'll just kind of darken that area by the thumb a little bit. Get some additional contrast developed. And we'll probably need to extend that thumb up. I don't know, I might have lost a little something in the length of that thumb in the process. It looks like it should come up just a bit higher. So I'm going to do that. Just make that a little more ambiguous. And then take some ivory black and a little bit of ultramarine blue. And I just want to basically bring this thumb up a little bit higher. But I have to make sure I don't go too dark with this. You don't want to go too dark, or it's going to look a bit cartoonish. Yeah, his thumb looked like it did need to get just a bit bigger. Okay, now we have this contrast right here by the neck, and we're going to add a darker value here, and we're just going to kind of blend this in probably should be using a different brush. So let's see if we can switch to this 1/8 inch flat and blend it out with that. Just blend this out with that. There we go. Now just kind of blend this in. That's good. All right, we'll just lift this camera up a bit so we can see what's going on and develop some more of the shading. So we have the shadow being cast from the hair onto the rest of the face. We want to develop that. Also want to darken this area below the nose just a bit. And again, getting that sense of the form of the thumb and the cheek. I'm radiating the brush out in a curvilinear way. I'm kind of dabbing with my finger to get some shading. So there's a lot more to do to really get this defined properly. I'm going to pull from this middle part of the mix. And then I'll show you this on the white card, what we've got. Just want to darken this a little bit right here. Right under the nose. And I'm going to move into this lighter part of the mix and blend that out from there. And just do some very short little strokes to blend this in. So here's my white card, and this is what I'm working with currently right there. That's how dark that is. So we're getting fairly dark at this point. Because when it looks that dark on that white paper, you can get a good idea of the actual sense of the value structure. Bring this up into the hair a little bit as well. The bottom of the nose, you want to darken that a bit more. And it actually, right at the tip, gets a little bit darker as well. I might not have the support for that, meaning I don't have enough layers underneath to get that to look right. I'll have to hit it with another layer later on. I can go over this maybe one more time right there if it's dried enough. All right, that's good. Let's see, I can work from these midtones here. So we have a whole series of tones from dark to light. See that? So now you always be able to pick something that can work with what you're doing. And that's what you want to have in your palette, just a whole assortment of colors that you can choose from, or in this case, tones. And then you just kind of keep spraying them with your mister, and that will keep them workable. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel each time and keep, creating new mixtures. You just work with what you have. So darken the nose a little bit. And I just want to smooth out this area in the nasolabial fold ever so slightly. Just smooth that out a little bit. This area here on his hand could be smoothed out a little bit. Let's just go over that and just start working some of these glazes in. A bit smoother. Okay. So that's good. And now let's do a little bit of work on the Bible. we're going to move down there and get some glaze work on that. And we'll just do some semi-opaque glazes over that area. Yeah, over the pages in shadow. So they need to get a little bit darker than what they are. This area here could get a little bit darker. Just going to stick with this flat brush, it's 1/8 inch flat. Move it into a little bit lighter on the edge. You can see in the reference photo it is lighter as it gets closer to his arm. Right, we add a little bit of glaze work on the interior pages here. Yeah, and actually I think this part could get a little darker. Let's just see if we can do that. While it's still wet, just go over it. If you go over it while it's still wet and you do it soon enough, you can still change it, but if it starts to get tacky, then you have to leave it alone. All right. Let's do a little bit of work on his arm. We're going to darken the lower parts of his arm. So we'll get this nice mid-tone here, and we'll begin to block that in a couple of areas on the arm. Just kind of blend it out. A couple of different forms that need to be established better. We need to get some of these wrinkles in here a little bit darker. And just kind of work out from there. This whole section here could get a little bit darker. And then we've got a wrinkle in here that's kind of dark in the middle. I'll establish that. Now that, I really didn't sketch it very definitively, so I'm kind of breaking new ground, being a pioneer here, putting in this wrinkle that really wasn't established very well. I have to make sure, just like the pioneers, didn't go over the Lewis and Clark Trail and all of a sudden put up a 4-lane divided highway. We don't want to go in too dark right away. We just need to kind of just gently put this in here. So begin to establish that new wrinkle in the clothing that I didn't before. All right, little wrinkle there. There, we're just going to darken these areas a bit as well. A bit of contrast. That's good. We can darken this area up here a little bit more. This wrinkle right here, just darken that a little bit more. This one a little bit more. And let's see, add a bit of matte medium to this. Just kind of fill this in. I need to smooth it out a little. I don't want it to get too dark in one area. So we're just going to smooth it out on the top. Let's switch to this filbert. We're going to use a size 16 filbert brush. Just kind of smooth that out. If you don't have a filbert, you can also use a flat. You don't necessarily have to use a filbert brush. No, that's not necessary. We can just use a flat here. Let me just grab this one out of retirement. And we'll just kind of blend out from here. Work into this lighter part of the mix. Smooth that out. Smooth this out. Move the camera so you can see what's going on. Yeah, that's good. This has to get darker. This arm has to get darker, even though he's wearing white clothing, it's in shadow, so it's important to really establish that sense of the shadow. See if I can get a little bit darker on the bottom, because it is darker as it gets closer to the edge of the table. Just try to work that in. All right, that's good. Now, see if we can go back to his hair and restore some of the darkness of the values there that were lost as we added some of these semi-opaque glazes. So I'm going to go back to his hair and see if that can be restored. So we're going to take, let's see, this small 1/8 inch flat, and we'll go with that. Let's add a little bit of ivory black and ultramarine blue again, and just liven that area up. And then let's just go in here and add some darker areas again. So it just takes quite a few glazes to really get it to look the way you want it to. Darken a few spots. After doing this semi-opaque smoothing layers, it is necessary to come back in and really kind of redefine some of your shadows. But again, it's not just restoring, it's also building new things. It's making it even better than it was. Semi-opaque layers are necessary, again, to smooth out that roughness that's created from the glazing technique. But we sometimes go back on top with some glazes and smooth it out even more. Add a little additional shading. And since you have the semi-opaque layer underneath, it looks smoother because of that. All right, I'm going to need to switch to a round brush. So let's see here. Find the right one. Yeah, this one. We'll use this one right here. That's a size 4, and just add a little bit of a darker value on the top. So it's right where that light is hitting from the lamp, creating that nice little chiaroscuro effect on the top of his head. We're going to have this darker hair right on top of that, and it's just like, you know, like it's often darkest before the dawn, like they say, you know. And in your life, a lot of times you'll have trials and difficulties, and if you just hang in there through those trials and difficulties, sometimes that light is right around the corner, so you don't want to give up. Same thing with your paintings, you know, you don't want to give up on your painting, even when it seems like it's at its worst, even when it seems like everything's muddy and chalky and out of proportion and blotchy. You don't want to give up, because sometimes that light is right around the corner. If you hang with it, make a few changes, you'll find that the painting ends up really turning out nicely. We have a wonderful group, our all-access membership at Realistic Acrylic Portrait School, and we really help each other there to improve in our paintings. And many of our students, after submitting their painting for critique, really turn the corner and improve their portraits dramatically. And you know, if they had given up, they would have never seen what they could have created otherwise. You know, having really gone the extra mile and just persevered through the challenges. So you never want to give up. All right, so here we have a little bit of a blend. We're gonna switch over to a slightly lighter part of the mix here and just turn the form on this hair and get it a little bit lighter and just a tiny bit of gradation as it blends into the highlight here. So I have just a bit of titanium white and some matte medium. We'll just kind of get a sense of gradation there as his hair gets in toward that area. And let's even add a little bit of a highlight or a start of a highlight of some of the hair that's catching the light right here. Just the start of that highlight. All right, so again, we're developing a good sense of the shading. There is a ways to go on it, but little by little, we're making it happen here with God's help. Now let's just go over a couple of these sketch lines, smooth them out a little bit. And that's right down here. I'm just going over some of the sketch lines on his arm with this glaze because I can just sense that it's going to work for it. And you can do that too at this stage. Just kind of go over some of these sketch lines and smooth it out a little bit because you got a semi-opaque glaze and it really can work for you on that. Now on his back, there's a little bit of a shadow I need to add, and I've been neglecting that for a while, but right here, his vest is casting a shadow from this light coming in from the window. And so these wrinkles are all in shadow here, and we just want to get a sense of that form. So I'm taking this darker gray here and just adding that. And again, this is semi-opaque, so we can do that with this glaze and it'll work pretty well. You can take the same color and just kind of refine the edge of the vest like that. And a little bit of ivory black and ultramarine blue. I do need to spray this palette again. What we want to do is just go over some of the edges here. And we're going to, just basically refine this edge. So this is in contrast. There's some wrinkles here on his arm that we can actually show there too, which is pretty neat. So right here, just start to show some of these wrinkles by creating the contour of that arm by the use of this shadow on the vest. So we've just got a couple of little divots there to show that there's some tension there in the sleeve and the way that's captured. So that's important too. All right. I'm just going to get this darker value below his arm, make sure I have it repeated elsewhere. I don't want this to be the only instance of this darker color that I'm using. Maybe I'll put a little bit more into his hair. It's always good for continuity of values to make sure that you're repeating some of the glazes you've done in other places. All right, so we're just going to do that. Make sure that we get a couple of darker values right there by the eye and under the nose, right under the thumb. A few spots in the hair. All right, there we are. Get a little darker right below the arm area here, or I should say above the arm area. This little section of his vest. We darken this. Just kind of bring that right upward. Get a little bit of a triangular shadow right there and strengthen that shape a bit more. You also can put in a little bit of a stronger shadow here between his arm and that sleeve. So even though, again, this is a white shirt, look how dark that value is. Very interesting how light works. And then we want to get this darker value down here by the bottom of the arm. All right. So this is good. I think we're at a good stopping point here for the lesson. And this is this is where we're at. So I like where it's coming along. So we've established a good sense of the contrast, and we already had that developed, but we really smoothed things out. Some of the brush work here by using these semi-opaque smoothing layers, and we added some additional nuances to the face. There's quite a ways to go on this painting, but it's definitely getting closer to the finish line. And I think when you add these semi-opaque smoothing layers to your painting, if you have any blotchiness at all, you can easily overcome it just by mixing a value that's similar to the area in question, and then making it very translucent, about 90% translucent, and applying it on top. And as we get closer to the end, in some areas you might be getting closer to 50% opaque, but this is where we're at in this stage. So we have one more lesson to go. One more lesson. We'll finish the portrait with that. And then I have a special invitation for you I'd like to share with you. But for now, I'm so excited that you stuck with us, with me and the other artists in this portrait painting. And you're doing such a great job persevering. And I just love seeing the paintings in the group. So thank you so much for your hard work. I look forward to sharing the last lesson with you, where we're going to finish the painting and sign off on it. But for now, just want to say thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, share it with your friends. And again, go to realisticacrylic.com for more tips, tutorials, and lessons, and to sign up for our portrait painting challenge. All right, so thank you so much. God bless, and we'll see you in the next video.